So this is the interesting thing is you could build the microservice now, which is the most attractive part of it. You can build it without having the cloud because the microservice itself is on the cloud.
Yeah.
So you can build it sort of ahead of time, and also to kind of, so you know the concept, clean the core, right? That's an SAP thing, right? Not necessarily an SAP thing, just any ERP. You want to clean that core off. So, in other words, eliminate customization so you can migrate standard to the cloud ERP equivalent, right?
Exactly.
So you can use microservices to clean the core, essentially, right?
Yep.
But the key factor is it's AI enabled, it's in the cloud, and it's now.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, we're joined by Dan Aldridge. Dan is one of those amazing people who shares a passion for helping companies, especially in manufacturing, get ready to engage with things in the ERP space. Because as you can imagine, that could be a very large investment. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes not so much. Dan is an expert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sean, for having me.
When we were talking about trends, things that we're seeing organizations do, there was this massive investment in these enormous megalith of systems that were absolutely monolithic, and they did everything. And this we've seen shift a little bit, and we've seen these microservices. And I think there's a lot of folks in the world that are like, micro what? Can you help break down what you see in microservices for ERPs look like? What are they? How do people use them today?
Sure. Well, even before we get there, I would mention that there are a lot of vertical industry solutions, which is kind of headed in the direction of microservices, because they're developed for industries like aerospace and defense and automotive, and they have very specific functionality instead of the sort of more monolithic, one-size-fits-all kind of systems. But microservices is kind of taking it a step further and saying you might have an on-premise system that it's going to take you a little while, like an ECC. It's going to take you a little while to get off of that, and you're running relatively happily on it. So you can, in spots, you can insert these microservices that are up on the cloud, and they use APIs typically to communicate with the on-premise system. And it gives you some AI-enabled type functionality without going to the cloud, because the cloud takes a long time for an organization, and particularly if they have a sort of a one ERP policy.
Yeah.
And, there's still companies out there, massive companies that say, it's this ERP or hit the highway. Whereas I think, in this day and age with iPads and a variety of ways of connecting and data lakes and that sort of thing, you don't really need to have one ERP anymore. You could have multiple, sometimes called best of breed, but I don't like that term so much. I just think it's a common sense approach to, if you're in plant, for instance, you might use a system that's made for that type of vertical industry, right? That particular plant, and then still feed it up to SAP, ECC at corporate or whatever you have at the corporate level. But these microservices are very interesting though, because you can, in spots, you can take a customization. Let's say you take a customization that you've had on your on-prem for years and years and years. It's probably been 10, 15 years, right? That you've been customizing the system.
That it's there, right? Some people have those, and they've been there so long, they forget that was custom.
Right. Well, the person that asked for it is probably gone, maybe for years, or retired or whatever. And so you might take a look at that particular customization, say, hey, that is something we want to keep. I mean, first you should look at eliminating it and thinking ahead to a cloud ERP that accommodates it, right? But let's just say you're going to stay on it for a few years. And you look at spots and you say, that's a customization that I still do need at the moment. Could be something that goes away with the cloud ERP, but I'm going to build a microservice, which would be a single application that sits in the cloud that's also AI enabled. So you can use an agent to run it. It'd be something that, like just take something simple like entering a purchase order, or changing a date on a purchase order, right? If you have a supply chain disruption, for instance, you might want to change a date on a PO and rerun your planning system, let's say.
Absolutely.
So you might have a little microservice here sitting on your phone, and you go in and you say, the date's different. Or even better, you have a supplier collaboration portal that allows the supplier to go in and change that date.
You bet. And I think that the key there is the ability to attach or bolt on or have go along with whatever you're using today. There's a whole bunch of modern ways to have something that can follow whatever, avoiding customization kind of principles you need.
Yes.
But to have it work and play nicely with the solution that you've got in a way that you can automate date changes for POs, and you can automate invoices, and you can automate whole bunch of these things that are super time consuming today, and you can apply AI to it without necessarily needing to wait for whatever massive sea change or enormous transformation project. There's things that you can do that are cost effective on a much nearer term, shorter term basis. I think that concept from microservices is so important because even if you have a swarm of microservices that handle a whole bunch of things, you can start with one or two that you can bite off really quickly in weeks.
Yeah, maybe most important ones, right? You rank your customizations in most important, most used. You can run process intelligence now on these things and find out which ERP sessions are being used the most. Yeah. And including customized sessions, right? Because you want to get rid of that code, even when you upgrade, So this is the interesting thing is you could build the microservice now, which is the most attractive part of it. You can build it without having the cloud because the microservice itself is on the cloud.
Yeah.
So you can build it sort of ahead of time and also to kind of, so the concept, clean the core, right? That's an SAP thing, right? Not necessarily an SAP thing, just any ERP. You want to clean that core off. So, in other words, eliminate customization so you can migrate standard to the cloud ERP equivalent. Right.
Exactly.
So you can use microservices to clean the core, essentially, right?
Yep.
But the key factor is it's AI enabled, it's in the cloud, and it's now.
Yeah. It's not 6 months from now.
It's now.
Now, to be fair, there are some organizations that do it
takes a while to build it.
Right? It takes, there are some organizations that do it to themselves because there's all of the reasons that it's going to take 9 months before anybody can turn anything on. Those are separate from the speed that you can move because there are many examples of even very large organizations that have moved quickly and done something in, 6, 8, 12 weeks. That's, not just a little proof of concept somewhere, but something that is live and running and going. And I think that can help reframe what good looks like. Because when we start thinking about good looks like, we can do it in something measured in weeks, we can make a difference. It takes buy-in from the supply chain team, from the IT team, from leaders there's some bill to pay for it. But the other thing is the longer we force things to take through large, complex enterprise processes that are sometimes helpful and sometimes slow it down, the more effectively we can move the needle. And I love seeing those leaders that get out there and they create that consensus to say, look, there's a better way to do this. The way we're doing it today is so manual. It's costing us all of X, Y, and Z. We could be doing this in an automated way, and it doesn't have to take very long to get there. And it takes leaders to stand up and say that, and then to build enough consensus internally to go make that happen. My hat goes off every time to those leaders that stand up and say, nope, we're going to do this better. And they are the most amazing people. Doesn't matter where they go, they end up leaving things better than they found them.
Yeah, it's also the case that you're not just replacing ERP functionality that's on-prem. You're also building new future-proof functionality that's very necessary in today's world. So, starting with COVID, we're all been dealing with the supply chain shocks and constantly changing dates and constantly changing amounts of things that you could get in, and the machines having to, you have sensors on the machines. You have an MES system to kind of measure, hey, this machine's going to go out. What happens to my supply chain if this machine that's a bottleneck resource goes out?
Yeah.
Right. So there's all of these things now, the changing climate that make an ERP cough, right? An ERP runs MRP. MRP runs once a week, right? All these shocks and everything, it's a week behind, or maybe you run a net change every day, right? But these shocks and things, a microservice, if you build it, it can update dates, for example. Yeah. That's a very good example, right? So go in and take a look at all your POs and things like that. And something happens, a supply chain shock, or you find out from this supplier that they're down, or this machine is down, or something like that. You can adjust these kinds of variables, and you can run a constraint-based planning, right? That even could be set up as like a microservice. So you can kind of have the system constantly updated and not waiting for a weekly planning run or even a daily net change planning run. That's kind of irrelevant because it's looking back a lot of times, and it's looking at dates that don't correspond with reality.
Well, and this to me is one of the most remarkable things about, call it some traditional MRP math and more of a demand-driven MRP. This is one of those key shifts in going from perfectly wrong all the time to directionally correct.
I like that. Can I use that perfectly wrong all the time?
Absolutely. I mean,
the phrase.
The pure mathematics of the perfect lead time and the perfect quantity and the perfect bill of material explosion, which still saying bomb explosion is one of those strange things that we actually still somehow have not come up with a better term for it. But that combination is so powerful when you can disconnect it. And if anybody out there has not explored demand-driven MRP and why the mathematics, very simply, are more accurate and they reduce the bullwhip effect that amplifies supply chain disruptions, I strongly encourage folks to get out there and learn about it. Chad and Carol are two folks that I'd interviewed. If you look back at some of the earlier episodes,
I need to catch up.
They run the Demand Driven Institute, and they genuinely understand how and why. Then they can do a much more elegant job describing why, putting in some buffers to go and absorb some of those shocks, and then it's more about a size of a buffer. It's simpler math. It is more accurate more often, and it is such a transformation. And the other thing that it starts to add too, in terms of helping to manage supply chain disruptions, one of the least talked about supply chain disruptions, Dan, is when the manufacturing planner goes on vacation for a week.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's a constraint, right? It's a constraint.
That is a constraint. And in some cases, it is a disruption because now nobody is mucking with the plan on a daily basis. And that calibration, that fine tuning, when the system is designed and running well and you've got the right buffers, the right flows and lead times and so on, and that comes together the right way, you can go on vacation for a week or two and your plan will hold and the system will update itself. It no longer needs to be the giant mystery of how did we come up with a plan. And oh my God, where's Dave? Somebody called Dave back from vacation. The wheels are starting to fall off.
Yeah, I mean, it's the shift from becoming a backward-looking, finance-driven organization to being a predictable enterprise, basically.
Absolutely.
And right, so you're looking ahead and you're predicting, you're using what's available to you, and you're using agents, AI and agents, to help you with gathering that data, right? Because you're not going to sit in your example of the gentleman that went on hiatus, right?
Yeah.
If you've got an AI agent, they work 24/7, right? And they're constantly monitoring this stuff. And if they take another example, like a Kanban setup, right? Absolutely. Or if you have pull manufacturing set up, then you can have sensors that can measure the level of parts in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't wait until you get out and you have to order another box because it takes you time to order that box.
That's right.
If you have a sensor to tell you you're going to need a box in the week, then you can get out ahead of that, right? And you can have sort of an AI agent that's enabled with that information from a sensor. Yeah. And you start doing, I call it the blue collar work. I mean, you got the white collar work that's where most of the focus of AI and agents has been in the white collar and the customer experience in the sales area and things like that, right? There's not been near as much in the smart factory and blue collar production areas
Absolutely.
using AI and agents. And I think it could be very useful in that because, if you have a bottleneck resource and you have, for example, what's Goldrat? That's his name, the gold guy. He said that you need to feed your bottleneck resources. So if you have a machine that is a bottleneck, you want to feed it 24/7. And so you want to keep inventory in front of it. Well, what if that bottleneck
as high as possible?
Exactly. So what if you had a predictive engine that says this bottleneck resource is going to go down in a week?
Yeah.
Predicted by AI. You can make sure that you get that thing repaired so that it doesn't go down.
Yeah.
You don't wait until it goes down because then you got all this inventory building up and you got carrying costs and you got all of the ramifications of, a big bottleneck sitting in the middle of your factory, right?
What I was going to add to that is that with some of the changes in technologies, we no longer actually need to install a physical sensor in each bin the way that we would have needed to 5 or 10 years ago. You can now use visual recognition to identify, a few dozen bins and are they, at or below the replenishment point. And then you can use that as opposed to pulling the card of saying you're out. You can use that for, oh, you're getting low, let's reorder now. That kind of automation, there's a lot of folks out there, Dan, that right now they're not even ready to imagine that that's possible, but it's already happening. And that to me is so powerful.
And that's independent of the ERP. And the
Absolutely.
ERP does what it does, and that's the way it's going to do it forever, right? That logic of an ERP, you don't change that overnight.
Figures it and changes all the data around it, and
no, you're right. I mean, that kind of technology is phenomenal to kind of get it to adapt and to be a buffer around it, or to predict things that it can't, and to adjust plans that could be constraint based on more accurate dates and more accurate numbers.
100%. One of the things that I'd love to get your thoughts and your wisdom on, Dan, is for organizations that are feeling like they're stuck because the organization has decided that in 2 years from now, there's going to be a giant business transformation and we're going to move or change or upgrade our ERP. And what do we do between now and then? Or maybe you're in the middle of a big thing, but you feel stuck. On one hand, we don't want teams biting off more than they can chew. But on the other hand, we often cannot freeze the business for whatever year or 2 or 3 while a big transformation happens. Yeah. How are you seeing helping and what are you seeing the most powerful leaders do today to move the needle now while the thing might be starting in 2 years or maybe they're midway through it, but there's something that has to change now?
Yeah, I mean, you want to do a lot of work on your business processes to prepare for that change coming. There's a lot of things you can do. You can also clean up data. You can look at your data and clean it up and use, there's some AI tools that you can use for that. You can run some process intelligence on what processes are being used. What could you eliminate? What are your customizations currently? What would you compare that to the standard functionality in the cloud, whatever you're going to, right? And you say, I don't need this list. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Customizations, place I went, $35 billion company, massive company. They had thousands of customizations of their old Bond 5 system. And they did sort of a categorization of they had to do actually a categorization of their systems because they had multiple systems first, right? And they had to decide which ones could be upgraded easily, which system would be the proper one to upgrade it to. Yep. And then they went through the customization list and found that a massive amount of them were reports that back around in the 90s or early 2000s, you had to customize to get a report to come out, right? And all of those can be eliminated through business intelligence. So you put a business intelligence, you put a data lake in there, and you pull it from multiple sources. So you can get all that set up right now. Right? And then you could say, that customization was part of a process that we no longer do, or it should be done a different way. So you modify the process. So you can actually flowchart the process and start working on, this is what we got, this is what we want to go to. That can be done long before the actual system arrives.
Yep.
Right? So I would say those kinds of things, you're doing prep, and you can even get a jump start on something like a change management plan, because you're going to need something like that, right? You're going to need the user training. You're going to need all of those things. So you want to get that kind of plan in place. And there's people that are really good at that, doing change management plans. We do it kind of as our part of our ERP implementations and stuff. But there are companies that kind of that are specifically doing change management. So you can start talking to those guys too.
And I think that is a collection of steps that are absolutely required before engaging an SI, right? Having somebody else come in and help you map your processes, unless they fundamentally work for you and are there, paid by you, incented, and managed by you. If they're managed by a systems integrator, this is sometimes a recipe for the SIs to view you as a walking PO. And I think this is the scenario that we need to make sure we avoid. I'm curious, Dan, I'm hoping you can share a little bit more about when somebody should reach out to you and your team, and how do they get in touch with you?
So our main website is pcgservices.com. We also have a website called asmartfactory.com. So we are also Smart Factory solution provider. If a client or whatever, or a customer is looking at or doing an ERP software selection project, any kind of evaluation we carry two big vendors. So we carry Infor and we carry NetSuite. So if you're looking at either one of those solutions, or you think you might want to, then you can reach out to us.
That's amazing. Dan, I know you're pretty easy to find online. I really appreciate you taking some time today to share your experience, your wisdom, and to help all of us on our collective never-ending climb to a stronger supply chain and procurement. Dan, thanks again. And to everybody, we'll see you next week.
Sean, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.